Okay, we're live, we're recording. The evolution of juvenile justice, past, present, and future. You guys can read the rest. Oh, I don't have to read it to you. Okay, historic foundation. Yeah, the reform, how we got to where we're at is super interesting. Some of the crazy stuff they did back in the day. From early reform schools, this isn't the one. There's a slide, I thought I put this there. It's called the do-gooders. It was a group of women in society, I think it was New York or Boston, saw these kids running around the street, they were orphans, and thought, we need to provide for these homeless orphans, give them a chance in life. They were really motivated by helping these orphans. I'm getting off point, okay? I'm not talking about the slide, but it kind of still falls in play. So they wanted to help these orphans. That was the goal. They put them in homes, they washed them up, gave them clothes, started to educate them. And it started off pretty good for the first few years. As they started to grow up a little bit more and they started replenishing with younger kids, they decided, we got these kids now probably in their teens, 11 to maybe 15, and figured they need a skill. And they started farming them out for labor. It only took no time at all to now it turned out for profit. And pretty much, excuse the term, but they're pimping out these kids to go work and lining their own pockets with the money. Okay, started off good, ended up bad. That was a little bit further in history than what we got here. So early reform, facilities-based labor discipline. We want to focus on modifying behavior. These juveniles, why are they out doing what they're doing? Why are they getting in trouble? Figure out those root causes, correct those, and maybe these kids won't go out and do not real bad things, but on their way to doing some bad things. In the early, before the big case was Gideon, juveniles really had no rights. The courts didn't know how to deal with them. They treated them as adults. They would be arrested, booked, and put in the tank right along with adults because they didn't know. They go to adult courts. They thought, well, they're juveniles, they have no rights, so pretty much they could do whatever they wanted with them. It wasn't until Gideon came along, and there's another case, hopefully I put it on the PowerPoint, that we started developing due process for juveniles. So keep that in mind. In 80, public concern drove policy, punishment replaced rehabilitation. Instead of dealing with these juveniles as juveniles during the 1980-2000, that was the period that we were really tough on crime. 3 strikes came out right about that time. We didn't care about rehabilitation, we wanted to punish. Okay? And that also trickled down into the juvenile system. We wanted to punish. Today, not so much. They have special courts. I'll focus mostly on that one. Over 450 juvenile drug courts exist nationwide. Focus on treatment rather than substance for substance involving these kids. Though that era of punishing started to erode, started to fade away. And we're turning the table and focusing now on providing programs to get these kids, these youths, in line. Covers delinquents and status offenders. Okay, we got to know the difference between a delinquent, which is a criminal violation, and a status offender. Does anybody even know? Does it say it? It doesn't really. Truancy, status. The only reason it's a crime is because of the age. Okay. Is it illegal to smoke a cigarette? No, right? I think everybody's. What is he? Is it 18 or 21 for cigarettes? I thought they bumped it up to 21. Okay, so 21. So if you have to be at least 21 to buy and smoke, to consume cigarettes, tobacco. I know that's for alcohol as well. So if we chose, and we're all over 21, to go out and light up and have a beer, we're fine. We're legal. But if a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old did the exact same thing, now it's a crime. And the only reason it's a crime, because it's called a status offense. You gotta know that one. It's a status offense. The only reason it's a crime is because of the age. Okay? All right. Juvenile versus adult. Key differences, and especially in the terminology. Your book, if you have your book, it has one page that lists one column what it is for an adult offender versus what that terminology is for a juvenile. So let's see. Purpose, protecting. This is really good informational, but it's not the slide you really want. And I did put it up here. So go back to your book. There is a page in there that lists the terms, because you're going to need to know that. What it is for juvenile versus that same exact term, but is it applied to an adult? Here we go. Procedural protections. Both systems provide Miranda warnings, which is hugely controversial. A Miranda warning for an adult. If we make an arrest, this person is over 18 years old, we can advise them of their Miranda. They have the right to remain silent, correct? How are you going to do that with a juvenile? They have no legal standing. But yet, juvenile probation officers will advise a juvenile of their Miranda. The judge will do it in court. Were you advised of your rights? Yes, Your Honor. But what difference does that make? I'm underage. I can't acknowledge that. I need an adult. It gets a little bit tricky there. You're working with juveniles, make sure you got an adult present that can acknowledge you read the rights of that kid.
Sometimes they're too young.
They're too young. That's what the court will say. But some of these kids are super sophisticated to commit these crimes, but you put them in a court, they dress up and say, no, Your Honor, I didn't know that. Liars! Oh, no. And that's why I don't work with kids.
What if they're emancipated?
That's different. Legally emancipated? Yeah, they have legal status, that's different. Then the court's already acknowledged, and yes, they can waive or invoke their Miranda rights, due process. Okay, so just be aware that the Miranda, when we're talking with a juvenile, it gets a little tricky. Both require the proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So when you're going to make an arrest of a juvenile, you have to have that same standard. Not reasonable suspicion or a hunch. He looks like he was up to no good. No. You still got to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt in order to take a juvenile into custody. Legal representation. At one point, juveniles had no right to an attorney. I think Gideon versus Wainwright changed that. Now they do. And then sentencing option. We do not want to sentence a juvenile to time, to be incarcerated. That is only as a last resort. The court will literally bend over backwards to accommodate a juvenile to keep them out of the system. Why do you think that's important?
The record.
The record? Come on, wake up, you're awake, come on. What do you think? Why? Why do we not want to do that to a juvenile?
What was the question?
Why do we not want to put a juvenile in a prison, in a jail? We'll do anything to keep them out of the system. You have any ideas?
Give them.
No, it's not.
Labeling.
Labeling. There you go.
Man, you know, the way the system is set up, I cannot give you I can't.
Okay, well think about it. You put that kid, a juvenile, and have him do time. Then they get back out. What's everybody gonna think? They label him. Oh, that dude he's bad. He did time. Stay away from him. We call it a jacket.
What about the juvie team though? If they go to juvie, don't they still get the same thing? That's what I'm thinking.
That's where we want to keep them out of that. The juvenile.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We want to keep them out of juvie. I haven't heard that in a while. You want to keep them out of that system. Put them back with their parents. Put them with an ankle bracelet. Whatever you got to do to keep them out of the system until you just can't. This kid just won't listen anymore. You got to lock them up. But it is a last resort. Keep that in mind if you want to work with juveniles. Okay? Flow of the juvenile justice system or a case. There's still the initial contact, whether you called in or you happen to witness the offense. There's intake, decision about diversion, formal processing. The officer, and this happened to me with my son. He did something stupid, got caught, and I get called into the police department. So I'm sitting there, my son's sitting there crying like a little girl. I did a big time wrestler, right? Did something stupid, and the probation officer is saying, we could book him, we could take him into custody, bring him before the court. I said, of course you can, but keep talking. Let's get to what you really want to tell me here. And then he goes, but he's a good kid. He's an A student. He was in ROTC. This isn't a stupid kid. He made one mistake. And so he goes, what we want to do is diversion. Would he be willing to work a community service? We'll give him a citation, a ticket. And as long as he completes it, there'll be no record that this ever happened. And I looked at my son, Joe, I go, what do you think? He goes, yeah, I'll do anything. Of course he would. And he jumped on it, and he did it. That wasn't the worst part. Now we had to go to the school. I actually went to the school board to argue for this kid. And they said, sorry, because of that offense, he has to go to continuation. They kicked him out of the regular high school. And he had to go to the, adult ed or whatever. The pregnant kids go on.
Alternatives.
There you go. Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So yeah, alternative. And he had to finish up the semester there. He was still allowed to wrestle. The ROTC, they kept him in the program because they knew he made a stupid mistake. I was taking a lot of painkillers because of my injury. He got into my painkillers and was giving them to his teammates on the wrestling team.
Damn.
Yeah. And they booked him. Said, sorry, shouldn't be doing it. Stupid of me leaving out my medication. Never even thought he would do something that stupid. But he did. And I explained to him, somebody could have really got hurt. He understands that now. But he learned a life lesson. Never forget. And I even told him that this is the lowest point in your life. People aren't going to remember what you did. They're going to remember how you handled it. Keep your head up high. Do your time. Get your ass back where you belong. Finish strong. And he did exactly that. Couldn't be more proud of him. Okay, so we want that same thing for these kids. Intake screening. We want to be able to resolve the juvenile offense at the lowest possible level. Okay, lowest possible level. We don't want to go to court. Okay, we don't want to deal with aftercare. If they go to court, that means they've been sentenced. They went to the hall. And if anybody's ever been to juvie, it ain't pretty. Okay, they got boot camps, they got schools, they got dorms, but it's not a good place to be for a kid. They get preyed on quite a bit. The weak do. Then they get out. Now what are you going to do with them? They got that label on them, they got that jacket, and that's a tough thing to take off. Okay, to remove that stigma. Police processing. Initial contact, officers arrest approximately 800,000 juveniles. Wow. But this is first contact, guys. This isn't they're running them through the system. This is just talking to them, maybe giving warnings, maybe citing them. Anything but dragging them through a court. Officer discretion, please decide whether to arrest or divert. Critical gatekeeping function. I can't stress that enough. If you become a juvenile officer, high school resource officer, juvenile probation, anything where you're dealing with kids, man, please take that job serious. Serious. That is so important. I would say more so than being on the street, working with adults. These kids, man, if you save one, it's worth it. Legal protections, they now do have Fourth Amendment rights, often affording more protection than adults. Officers engage in delinquency prevention efforts, school resources. We want to get these kids while they're still young, teach them the right way, and hopefully they will pursue a life free of committing these types of offenses. Okay, another thing you need to know. In juvenile court, there's a huge difference between juvenile court, adult court. Most juvenile cases are heard by the bench, which means just the judge. They're also done in closed proceedings, meaning they're not open to the public. Whereas in adult court, you can go in, sit down in the gallery, and spend the whole day there listening to what's going on. Not in a juvenile court. It's to protect the juvenile. I served as investigator for a few of those juvenile cases. I did a lot of workup. I'd get called into the courtroom, did my thing, right? Present my report, answer a few questions, then excused. I wasn't even allowed to stay in the courtroom. I had to leave. Okay? They're very protective when it comes to these juveniles. Rightfully so. Okay, rightfully so. Factors influencing police discretion. Obviously, the seriousness of the offense. If the infraction isn't that big a deal, okay, work with these juveniles. Priors. How many times have you spoke to this kid? Is it a first-time offender? Or is it a repeat offender? You'll know. And once you work these streets long enough, you know exactly who these kids are. Parental support. You call the dad, mom, did they come? Or did they just say, ain't my problem, doing your job? Okay, it does happen. It does happen. So if it's a first contact, never had any problems, the parents are there to support the police, okay, in resolving this issue. And they're willing to cooperate. You want to get this done at the lowest possible level. That's why I use my sons as a good example how this does work if done correctly. They had a good kid, first-time offense. They had good parental support and absolute full attitude. Shit, I was in uniform when I had to go down. I came straight from work. So of course I'm gonna get on his ass and have the police. They did everything correctly. I support them. Racial disparities. We've talked a little bit about racial disparities in the adult system. Is justice fair? Is it truly blind? Ethan shaking his head, about fell off already. Yes, of course not. Yeah, of course not. Yeah. I'll wait. So no, it's not fair. The adult system is not fair. But they do the best they can. Are there some corrupt judges? Sure. Most of them are good though, but there are bad seeds everywhere. All right. So why would the juvenile system be any different? Unfortunately, it's not. It's the same thing. You got a lot of good juvenile people. You got some bad ones. Most of the time, the system does a good job. Unfortunately, sometimes it falls short. But when it fails to recognize this racial disparity, it fails everybody, because that's just not right. A person's race, religion, sexual preference, height, weight, look, that should never come into play. Stick to the facts. Right? Stick to the facts. Let's see, what do we got? Data collection, track demographics at all points. That's how we keep track of a young, say 15-year-old black male in Stockton, California that stole a car versus a young 15-year-old black male stole a car in Temecula. Circumstances, very, very similar. In Temecula, they get a warning. Don't do it again. Maybe some community service. In Stockton, they get sent to juvie, 2 years. Wow, that's a huge disparity. Why?
Wait, what was the first one?
Stockton, 15-year-old black male stole a car. They get sentenced to 2 years in juvie. Same circumstances in Temecula.
Because this is suburbs,
They get a
and
second.
there's more like the hood.
Exactly.
You know, more kind of.
People tend to be less tolerant because they see that more often than you do in a community like Temecula. That's really what it boils down to. Is it fair? Hell no. And that's some of the things they try to look at. Why the disparity? There are certain pieces of legislation that try to address this. It's called Fair Sentencing Act is one of them, that actually looked at these disparities and found that, yeah, they're really out of whack, way out of balance. They passed some more administrative bulletins telling the courts, you need to watch this a little closer. But it's still going on. It'll never stop. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Juveniles' legal rights. They do have rights now. This is a good one. New Jersey versus TLO. Establish reasonable suspicion standard, lower the probable cause as required for adults. Okay. Remember those standards? The highest is the probable cause. But for adults, when you're dealing with a juvenile, that standard is lower. You only need reasonable suspicion. Why do you think that was so important? Now think to yourself, you're the school resource officer, you're the juvenile officer. As an officer, why is this important for you? Put some thought into this. You don't? Nobody. Nobody wants to be a juvenile cop. Good, I should have known. Do you really want, go ahead.
Maybe like it helps officers like intervene more easily when other cases they wouldn't be able to.
Good. More easily and at a lower level. Why wait for that offender to commit the crime? To do something more serious that you might not be able to help them with. Or if you can interact a little bit earlier, you could divert them and possibly save them from going to juvenile. That's really the motivation. Give that officer a little more latitude, not to pick on the kids, but to interact a little bit earlier instead of having to wait for them to really get themselves in a lot of trouble. Where now you don't have that flexibility to defer. That was one of the key reasons they argued this case. I'm glad they won it. A school calls for an officer because they suspect that one of their students is trafficking drugs. They pretty much know, they got it pinned down to this locker, but they want the officers present. So the officers come in. Can the officers open the locker? No. Because they would need probable cause. They would need a subpoena to get into there. But the school administrators don't. They have to work off reasonable suspicion. So they can't open the locker. So what they do is have the officers present. They open the locker and the officers present. They'll go through it until they say, oh, look at what I found. They find whatever the contraband is in front of the cop. And now the cop says, thank you very much, step aside, and they take it from there.
Plain view, sir?
Exactly. In plain view, they did not violate anybody's rights, and it all works. And that's how they try to keep these schools clean. School resource officers do an excellent job, as long as they're doing their damn job. They're out there getting to know the kids, getting to identify problem situations, intervening before they get full blown. Student privacy, it's balanced between school safety needs and privacy rights. Schools have greater search latitude. Not quite what you would find in a prison, but better than you would have at a regular, like this college. Okay? Because you're dealing with juveniles. So the court said the reasonable suspicion standard would apply, and they have a little bit more latitude when it comes to searching. Okay? And that's really good. I'm glad they did that. But the student still has some expectation of privacy. Just not much. Yeah. All right, so the intake process, let's see. Initial screening, we kind of talked about that. It's the formal decision where the officer decides which way to go. Detention decision. If the officer thinks, no, this is more serious, it warrants being held and accounted to a court, then they will make the arrest. They can contact the parents, cite release, or detain. They still have a little bit of flexibility. But they're going to file a petition. This case is going to go before a judge. Formal document initiating court jurisdiction, similar to a criminal complaint. In adult court, it lists the allegations against the offender. The legal document for an adult is called what the hell they call it here? Criminal complaint. That's what we call it in the adult court, criminal complaint. The same exact document in the juvenile system is called the petition. Again, difference in terms. Same exact thing. Hearing. There's detention, adjudication, disposition. At the detention process, usually occurs in the presence of whoever's responsible for the kid soon after they're being held. And they try to decide, are they going to continue to hold this person, this juvenile, or release them? The adjudication is similar to that in an adult trial, determines allegations if they're proven, and they must still be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in court. In court, the proof still has to raise to that level, not reasonable suspicion. Then the disposition hearing is equivalent to sentencing. Here's another difference in terms. Disposition hearing for a juvenile, sentencing for an adult. They still try to focus on rehab. We don't want to lock this person up if we don't have to. It can include probation, treatment, or other types of alternative sentencing. Waiver, this is good. We're going to waive them to an adult court. This is a really good slide. Take a look at it. Tell me, why would we want to waive a juvenile and hear this case in an adult court?
Do we want to charge them as an adult?
Why? Why do we want to charge them as an adult?
Because of the severity of the crime.
Severity of the crime. Severity. Give me an example. How severe is that crime got to be?
Murder.
Murder, multiple murders, special circumstances. How about rape? Would rape raise to that level? Maybe, right? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It's so crazy though. Like some people, they give more time for murder than they do. Like, well, sometimes people get like are in jail for like littler crimes
Uh-huh.
than rape,
Uh-huh.
and then but rape gets less time. It's kind
Yeah.
of crazy. Yeah.
That's wrong. They've tried to change that now. And that's because of the way rape was classified before and the scale for the offense. They bumped it up since then. In California, it was 8109 that bumped rape up to a more serious offense with more time assessed. Yeah.
I believe that sex offenders should not see the day of light, which means like, I would hope one day the law changes where you can't register as a sex offender, like you're gonna be thrown in there for good. Because those people reoffend quietly, reoffend within family, kids, it's a real thing.
It's sad. It's tragic. It really is. And if they ended up doing life without the possibility of parole, I'd be okay with that too.
I've seen some cases though where the offender didn't get any time.
No, I've seen them too. They walk away. Yes.
So, yeah, like, so there was, the conversation was based, or you and her conversation was on how murder, if you
Yeah.
get less sentence, than if you were to commit rape, you would get more sentence.
You get more time for a lower offense than you would rape. Not so much murder, but a lower offense.
Oh, it's a lower offense?
Yeah, like a lower, say, domestic violence. Something serious still, there's great bodily injury, and you're sentenced to, say, 10 or 12, 15 years in prison. Whereas a rape, you're getting 5, 6 years. So, well, that just doesn't, that doesn't seem the way out, right? At least that's what you're saying.
Do you think they'll ever change that eventually?
They're working on that. Yeah, they really are. They're trying
I
to.
don't mind that stuff, like, that rape stuff, is
Yeah.
crazy, that's just like, people, if they don't get through that, people take it up.
It's wrong. Then there's the date rape issues.
Honest.
That's another huge damn thing, yeah.
Or like the single moms that date rapists and don't even know it and bringing them around their kids and their kids get molested and then.
That happens a lot.
Oh,
yeah.
That happens a
And
lot.
then some don't care.
So how are we gonna
Some
fix it? We know the problem.
But yeah, you can't fix in a household situation, because it's like, in order to do that, then you're telling people that you want cameras in the house. You want to be watched 24/7, when you don't, and it's like, the protection and the things we do, I guess what he's saying is the protection and stuff that Americans want, it's hard to provide without that 24/7 care, like, and this could be accessible, I'm guessing, but it's just that, like, if you get it, you're not gonna, it's like a parent being in your room 24/7.
You brought, this issue you're talking about was what we talked about day one. the balancing act. How many rights are you willing to sacrifice for that security? That's what it's all about. And if you're willing to sacrifice some of your rights to allow law enforcement to do a better job, at what level do you draw that line?
At what level?
Yeah. It really, it's a good point, man, because that's
Yeah,
exactly what it is.
I agree.
It's a balancing act.
It's a good-
Yeah. So good luck with that, guy, and I'm done. It's your job to figure it out. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we want to try these juvenile offenders for serious crimes in adult courts for everything we said. Here's another nugget. In a juvenile court, regardless of the seriousness of the crime, you can only hold that offender to the age of 25. They could be a multiple murder, homicidal maniac. You tried him at the age of 15. Did 2 years in court, and the judge sentenced them as a juvenile. At 25, they're done, they're out. There's nothing you can do about it. That's why we want to try him as an adult, so we can always have control over this offender. Let me talk about the rape real quick. What California's recognized, yeah, it's a big problem. So what they've done is they developed these hospitals now, mental health institutions. And a rapist can be deemed a threat to the community, have served their time, be released, but they go before the judge as a civil commitment because the propensity to re-violate is pretty high, and they need mental help. The key is mental health. So we send them to the hospital, which is still like a little prison, and they stay there. They evaluate it once a year. They go before the judge. They're given treatment. They're doing counseling until the judge determines they're no longer a threat.
Yes.
It is an awesome tool that's really saved. It's from Polly Klaas. That's going way back years ago. But Polly Klaas was the one case that happened that motivated California to do something about it. And what they did was fantastic. So that is one tool that we do have to try to protect our communities from serious rapists. Not the one, Soshi, you're talking about the family member, you know, that we're talking this guy, this repeat offender, serial rapist. Those are the ones we're targeting. Unfortunately, those
Yeah,
ones,
because
they fall
some
through
of
the
them have,
cracks.
like, sexual desires that are just so intense that will reoffend.
They will.
It doesn't matter.
No.
Because it's a fetish to them. It's a
Yeah.
There
fetish.
you go, that's the word,
And
fetish.
they become addicted to that, and it's like an urge that they.
And the sad thing is, a lot of times,
Controlling them.
the victim doesn't want to say anything. And sometimes they're even told to shut up. Maybe because that person that is the offender is the sole breadwinner. They're the ones providing for the family. God, don't say anything, because where are we gonna live? How are we gonna eat?
But it happens so much, it's crazy.
Too often.
Like, guys, right now we're in class and it's probably happening somewhere, you know what I mean? It's
That's the sad fact.
It kind of brings it back to like the scenario with the cops and the like American thing. Like it's like you got the in-house thing's got to be a trust. Like the parent, the
Yep.
mom's got to be like, all right, you know what, this dude is not. I shouldn't be having this. But it'd be a parent thing. It's a parental thing. That shit is like parents don't be ready to be parents.
That's why we don't have kids, right, baby?
And
Oh.
some stay and stick it out, and they even on their side, and that's the crazy part.
It's tough. It's tough. It is. And let's just leave it at that. It is. So we're never going to solve this. Conversation go on and on and on.
Right.
But yeah, my God, it is a terrible situation. So we got this kid. They're a serious offender. We want to get them to an adult court. There's different ways to do it. Judicial waivers one, prosecutorial's another, statutory, and reverse, bringing them back. So the book does a good job of covering how we get a juvenile offender into an adult court and why. So be familiar with that. Consequences of adult court. Is it always beneficial to transfer this youth offender to an adult court? Everybody say no. There's no absolutes, guys, in real life. So if you see somebody saying, is it always good? No. Do we never? Those are key words. Look for them in your exams. And if the word always and never, they're absolutes, probably a false statement. Okay, don't fall for it. Higher victimization rates. Youth in adult facilities face greater risk of being assaulted, sexually and physically. Okay? Be aware of that. increased suicide rates, higher recidivism, and the stigma. The stigma we put on these kids. How are they going to come back out and have any chance at living a normal life? We can argue and say it's their fault. They're the ones that committed the offense. Shame on them. They made their own bed, let them lie in it. I've heard all of these things, and I agree with most of them. But every once in a while, there's that one kid that should have not gone to juvenile, and it happens. So be aware. Supreme Court limits on juvenile sentencing. Here's some good cases. Roper prohibited the death penalty. Well, how are we going to kill a kid? Okay, Roper said don't do that. Graham banned life without parole for juveniles. Can't do that either. Because remember, their minds, according to the court, aren't fully developed. So why are you going to sentence this kid whose mind isn't fully developed to a life in prison without the chance of getting out? Better let that mind develop, train them, rehabilitate them, give them a chance to get out. That's what Graham did. Miller prohibited mandatory life without parole for juvenile homicide offenders. What Miller did is said, we can't use a blanket and say any juvenile who committed a homicide will go to prison for life. They said no. Evaluate each case individually. And I like that. Should always be that way. Montgomery applied the Miller retroactively based on prior juveniles who had been sentenced differently. So Miller set the standard. Later on, Montgomery, some of the kids that were sentenced before Miller said, hey, what about us? It's called ex post facto. They go back and say, okay, yeah, you're right. We'll apply this law. And it worked for juveniles. Status offenders, the unique challenge. What do we got? Deinstitutionalize, that's a different word. Deinstitutionalization. Go ahead, try it. Shut up. Good job. Deinstitutionalization. 30 plus years. If a juvenile or any offender is incarcerated for that amount of time, good luck changing that mindset where there's nobody there to tell them what to do. Okay, they don't succeed on the outside, they usually reoffend. And what else we got? Status offense cases processed yearly, 95,000. And non-detention rate. Proportion diverted from secure, about 75%. That's not bad. Out of that 800,000 that we saw in the previous slide, that means only 25% are actually going to move up the system to the next level. Not bad. Juvenile correctional options. Okay, the continuum. I like this word. Continuum. We use it for use of force. What it means is it moves in both directions. We can escalate and we can de-escalate. Right? So that's what we're doing here. Home-based programs, day treatment, community placement, secure facility. Maybe we start, because of the offense, at a secure facility. But based on the treatment, we start de-escalating how we're going to monitor this individual. Maybe all the way to a home-based. Similarly, we may start with home-based, but because they don't listen, continue to be a problem, we have to escalate now the type of observation we have. Does that make sense? Yeah. We call it progressive discipline when you're dealing with unions. You don't want to throw the hammer at somebody for the first offense. Depends on what it is. You counsel the next offense, maybe you're going to write them up, so on and so forth. Similarly here, but depending on the offense, you may need that hammer and go straight for secure facility. So just be familiar that it is a continuum, meaning it can move up or down. Therapeutic approaches. Cognitive behavior. Addresses thinking patterns of delinquent. Teaches problem solving. Has anybody taken AJ 112? AJ 112. Criminal theory, I think we call it. Excellent class. If you want to study law and not really work out on the field. It's really more designed for people who want to study why people do what they do. Criminal theory is an excellent class to do that. This kind of touches on that, the cognitive behavior. Why did this juvenile offend? Why do they continue to offend? What's that trigger? Why do they do what they do? Figure that out. You can modify it, keep them from reoffending. Trauma-informed care recognizes prevalence of trauma among justice-involved youth, focuses on healing rather than punishing. It can be traumatic to be taken into custody. Imagine, an officer comes into this classroom. Okay, come on. Calls you up, brings you to the end of the here, put your hands on the wall, pats you down, cuffs you up. Is that gonna make you feel good? Hell no, right? Who would like that to happen to them? Nobody. No, you don't want that.
No, I actually had a cop, a school cop drag me out by my backpack because someone pointed the finger that I had weed in my backpack, but I didn't. And they searched me at the office, and then they called my parents and were like, "Oh, we're so sorry. Like, we didn't mean to do that once."
They dragged you?
Yeah, they grabbed my back and they're like, "Let's go." I was like, "What?" I was crying because someone just pointed the fingers just to point the finger.
Would you consider that a traumatic offense?
Yeah, it was.
As a father, what would you say
Damn.
should be like? What would you say as a father? You like? I'm like, as a father, if that, not saying her, but if your daughter came back to you like, yeah, these cops grabbed my backpack and pulled me out the classroom.
I always want to know why. What have you been doing? Why you? Why did you point the finger at me?
Yeah, they didn't like me, and they ended up like investigating. They're like, "Oh, okay, these girls don't like her," and then.
Wouldn't it make more sense to investigate that first?
I was thinking,
Yeah.
Right? Get the facts
It was
first.
Shabela Middle School.
Yeah. And it's only weed. It's not like you had a bomb or gun in there.
No, they said they smoked weed.
You could have waited. I would have never done that.
that's just embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. Young says here, it wasn't a time sensitive. Think about, what if the officers would have waited outside the class? Maybe did a little more investigating. When you come out of the class, pull you to the side and say, you come with us. We need to talk to you.
Let's go.
It would have been less traumatic. Keep that in mind. If that's ever you guys, you get a call like that, don't do that.
That school is known for drugs.
That's bad.
I was just going there.
Trauma. Poor Soshi. She's still living with it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Family systems. Most of these kids that offend like that have some family issues going on. How do you treat the family? It's easy to put a word up there and call it therapy and say, okay, yeah, we're going to provide some therapy for it. But that means everybody's got to be willing to come in, be receptive to the counseling. That ain't going to happen. Sorry. So yeah, family systems therapy. In theory, again, it sounds good. But is it really going to happen? Probably not. Okay, restorative justice, that's a huge move. That's kind of the trend that we're leading towards in adult courts, similarly with justice. Emphasizes repairing harm caused by the offense, involves victims and communities in resolution. Instead of just locking up the offender and throwing away the key for 2 or 3 years, how about getting the victim, right, the victim of the crime, across the table with the person that caused the harm? Do some mediation. This is what you did to this person. How can we make it right? Well, he destroyed my home. Maybe coming in, do some repairs. Maybe painting a house. Maybe doing yard work. I don't know what it is. But doing something. It's a diversion. Again, keeping them out of the prison system. And trying to emphasize the damage this offender caused to the victim. That's what it's all about. So when you hear the term restorative justice, that's what we're trying to do. And that is the swing, the trend that we're moving towards. Okay, aftercare, the critical transition. Intensive aftercare programs. What are we going to do with these youths, these juveniles, to prepare them to be successful? Once they're done, with whatever level of monitoring that's in play. If they're in the juvenile hall, what are we gonna do? If they're in a treatment facility, if they're at, what's it called, locked up at home with an ankle bracelet, what are you gonna do to make sure this person does not reoffend? That is the key, that's instrumental. We do not want to see these offenders again. Early planning before release, family involvement, education, vocation, and graduated freedom in small increments. Give them a taste. And that's what work release, work furlough programs are all about for the adults. Let them be locked up at night, release them in the morning so they can function in the community, go to work, have lunch, see friends and family. 6 o'clock, they come back to the facility, they're locked up. You do the same thing with the juvenile. Same thing. If they're in juvenile hall, do something to get them out. Introduce them back into the community. Give them a taste of what they're missing. Make them want it. That'll inspire them, motivate them to stay out. The first line of defense, keeping a juvenile from ever even offending. These are just some thoughts on that issue. Early childhood programs. We have Head Start. I had a program I kind of monitored. It was called First 5 up north, nutrition-based for kids. And it worked okay. I'm not going to say they were completely successful, but it was okay. So early childhood, we want to get to these kids while they're still young. School-based initiatives. Bullying. This should never happen, but it does. Social skills, conflict resolutions. Teach these kids how to handle conflict without resorting to violence. Remember, if they resort to violence, everybody loses. Say, how many fights have you won? None. Because you should never be in a fight. If you have to get in a fight, people still ask me, how come you don't carry a gun? Because I think that's stupid. I really do. If I carry a gun, what I'm saying is I don't trust my ability to manage conflict. And I really do. Yeah, weapons last resort. And I have carried it in certain situations because I know I'm going into a dangerous. But most of the time, day to day, I don't need one. If I have a weapon, a gun, a firearm, that means I'm anticipating problems. I really don't anticipate any problems. I still carry it with me. It's in the vehicle, but I'm not going to carry it on me. It shouldn't have to. School-based initiatives, reaching the youth at an early age, community-based, get them involved. Get these kids off the damn couch, away from these Nintendo things. Worst thing that can happen to them. Get them outside. Get them playing with other kids. Get them involved in YMCA, Boys, Girls Clubs, whatever the hell, Little League, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, doesn't matter. Make them do something. Family support. I think I should put family support over here, number 1. Family support is the main key. If you have a good family, and it doesn't mean you have to have 2 parents. You can have 1 single parent, but they got to give a damn. They got to be involved in that child's life. If they're not, that child's, you're setting them up to fail. You really are. So be involved in your child's life. Prevention versus reaction. An ounce of prevention, there's a saying, who knows that? An ounce of prevention is worth, anybody? You guys are all bad, just like me. I don't know sayings, but there is one. An ounce of prevention is worth something. In other words, preventative measures will always be the best approach. Doesn't always work, but if we can do it, it's much better. Prevent the children, these juveniles, from committing crimes. How? Education, vocation. Get them involved in something. When my kids were young, I had 3 of them. When they got to junior high, I'm okay, you're going to go to school, you get home, you do your homework, then you go watch TV for, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it was. I put them on a program and it was written out. You also have to be involved in some kind of activity. I don't give a damn what it is. My son was wrestling, my girls were volleyball and swimming. Always. After school program, you had to be involved. It wasn't a choice. Mandatory. You get to pick, or I'll pick for you. They don't want me picking. So they did, and they did very well, except for the one issue I told you about. They did really good going through school. I am a firm believer, you keep that kid active. What's it called? Idle time. Is it
The Devil's Workshop.
Say it again?
Idle Hands are the Devil's Workshop.
That's it. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. You don't want a kid just sitting around thinking, "My God, maybe they don't even have a Nintendo. Okay, what should I do? I got to do something. Ooh, I wonder how fire works." You start playing with matches. You start grabbing lizards and ants and burning. You know where that's going. Ain't gonna end well. You got to keep them busy. Came home from work one time, and my son and youngest daughter were sitting on the couch, and I said, "What are you doing?" "Nothing, we're bored." Ooh, wrong thing to say to me. Bored? You got nothing to do? We hadn't put in the backyard yet, we were building a pool. So there was a bunch of rocks and boulders and everything out there, right? And so I got 2 5-gallon buckets, and I loaded up with rocks. And I got the water hose, okay, I want you to take this bucket, wash each of these rocks, and then put it back where the pile is. Yeah, like that. That's stupid. I said, "Yeah, but you won't be bored. Give you something to do. When you get done with that bucket, let me know, I'll get another one. There's plenty of them out there." They didn't get halfway through the bucket. It took them hours. And it was hot that day too. But guess what they never told me again? Never heard that word. I'm bored. It works. Now they're thinking, what can I do so Dad doesn't make me wash rocks? They stay very busy to this day. Okay, so we want to use preventative measures. They're cheaper and we get better results. And whatever those measures are, communication, programs, book clubs, I don't care, do something. Evidence-based prevention, multi-systemic therapy, intensive family-based. Again, this is the same thing we just talked about. They're presenting it in a different format, emphasizing you gotta have family involvement. Because if the family doesn't get involved, I promise you law enforcement will. And you don't want that. Contemporary challenges, racial disparity. These are some of the issues we face today. Racial, mental health, public perception. Resources are very limited, and the trauma that we spoke about. These are just some of the hurdles that we got to overcome dealing with juveniles. And if you look, it's not that different from when you're dealing with adults. Very similar. You still have racial disparity. You still have these mental health issues. It doesn't really change. But if we can address it when it's a young mind, and you can mold it a little bit better, maybe you won't have an adult offender. That's the goal. Specialty courts do pretty good. I like this last one, the peer court. You committed a crime in high school. You did something stupid. But instead of going to juvenile, you go in front of a board of your peers, just like that. A lot of success with these types of courts. They even have drugs, where they'll do a small, yeah, here, there's drug court. They do have some drug courts that have been very successful. They have neighborhood courts. They're monitored by law enforcement. But the community has the authority to take some action, as do the teens in these lower courts. It really does work. Nate, did you say you were involved in something with teens?
Youth court?
Youth court.
Yeah.
Right, you were telling me about that. Similar?
More like teen peer courts. It's
More like teen peer?
Yeah.
You get any kind of result? Good result? Bad result?
Mainly good result.
Amazing good.
Have been a few bad results.
Well, it's never going to be all good.
Yeah, I did meet someone here who went through the youth court in a different county though.
Okay.
Yeah, a few semesters ago.
So youth court. Make these youths, these offenders, accountable to their peers. Decent success rates. And the future. Where are we going? Where are we going with this? Neuroscience. I did neurodiversity training, about a month, 4 or 5 weeks, to understand how neurodiverse students think. They think a little different. Learned a lot. Trauma responsive systems, community-based alternatives, and restorative practices. These are just some of the ideas that they've come up with to address the problem of juvenile offenders. That's what it's all about, guys. You have a good idea, write it up, publicize it, you could get some money. Nothing wrong with that, right? Make some money off a good idea. Maybe not. Maybe you want to dig holes with a shovel. That's okay too. Not for me. Okay, questions on this presentation?